Good morning. Welcome to this EPC Thought Leadership Forum. I'm very happy to welcome the President of the European Parliament. Clearly, it's a very momentous time. It's very timely to have you here. Every day, we're hearing challenging news. Overnight, we heard the development of President Donald Trump pausing military aid for Ukraine. So it's very clear that Europe has to take more responsibility for its own security, for our own defense. But it is not an area where Europe has been particularly strong in the past, especially not on our own without the US. So the big question is, what can be done, and what role does Europe have to play in this? How can we make real progress also in a week where decisions have to be taken, actions have to be on the table? So very happy to have you here on such an important moment, and looking forward to hearing your remarks and the discussion afterwards. And I'm now handing over to Corina, who will be moderating this session. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much, Fabian. Is this microphone working? Yeah, okay, great. Thank you so much. Madam President, dear and distinguished guests, good morning, and a very warm welcome also from my side to this Thought Leadership Forum, which is a format in which the European Policy Center engages with top decision makers to discuss issues that are complex, that are critical, facing Europe today. You know, the kind of issues of which there is no shortage of, as Fabian has just kindly reminded us. Few would disagree that profound and powerful forces of change are upon us, challenging our most sacred values, institutions, models, and threatening our peace. And many in such times call for inspiring, responsible, and decisive leadership. Well, today we have leadership in the House, in the person of none other than the President of the European Parliament, Roberta Metsola. We are honored by her presence and very much looking forward to hearing her reading of the geopolitical situation in which we find ourselves, but also what the EU and the European Parliament in particular can and should do about it. Madam President, thank you very much for accepting our invitation. It is a real pleasure to have you here today, to welcome you at the European Policy Center. I will shortly invite you to give your opening remarks. And the plan is that I will then follow up with some questions of my own, and then we will open up for questions and comments from our participants in the room. So with that, with those housekeeping rules out of the way, Madam President, the stage is all yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Corina. Good morning to you all. Thank you to the European Policy Center for hosting this forum at a pivotal moment for Europe. To paraphrase Harold Wilson, at the moment it feels like an hour and not a week is a long time in politics. And what matters now is, as was just said, what Europe does next. The fact is, we can't let our future be decided by others. Until we take full charge of our own security, we can never feel truly safe. So the only two questions that matter now are, how do we do it? And how fast can we get there? It's hard to overstate how critical this moment is. And for those who like three-word slogans, I will offer one. We need confidence, courage, and cooperation. We need confidence because we must believe in Europe's ability to rise to this challenge. Look at how we weaned ourselves off Russian gas in record time. Now we must show that same determination in boosting our defense capabilities. We need courage because the threat that we face is serious. Expectations are high, And we must have the ambition and the tools to match those expectations. We cannot allow short-term politics to stand in the way of our long-term security. And that means that we need to make and take the tough choices to keep Europe safe now. And finally, we need more cooperation because strength is in our unity. Individually, on the global stage, we are all small players, but together we are a force to be reckoned with. And this is, in fact, not about slogans, it's about real and ambitious solutions. Nothing can be off the table. And like with our response to the pandemic, exceptional circumstances call for exceptional decisions. Now, we are the co-legislator and the budgetary authority, and as that authority, we at the European Parliament have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to make sure that our laws, our funding, and our policies reflect the urgency of this moment. And let me tell you this very clearly, we will not shy away from this responsibility. It is the Parliament that offers the democratic legitimacy to take the decisions taken at European Union level. And that is how, and that is why we find majorities sometimes with difficulty to lead. In the Parliament, our immediate priority must be Ukraine. It is important to underline that the people of Ukraine are not alone, and that we will continue to stand with Ukraine for a just and lasting peace, just as we have done since day one. A lot has been written and said about Ukraine, Europe, and the United States in the last days. But if I can sum it up into saying that ultimately we all want the same thing. We want an end to this war, and we want lasting stability. And we all want peace in Ukraine. But at the end of the day, such peace must be a real one, with freedom and with dignity and with security for Ukraine. Because what was true 3 years ago remains true today. If Kiev falls, Europe and the world will be less secure, it will be less safe, and it will be less prosperous. And that cost would be eye-wateringly higher than now for all of us and for our children. Supporting Ukraine is a way to ensure that that does not happen. It is necessary, not out of charity, but out of our duty to keep Europe safe. And we must continue to do that. So we are all determined to ensure that we find a formula that allows for real peace, that lasts beyond the immediate, and that balances responsibilities. In other words, a way forward that deters an aggressor from simply waiting a few months or years before continuing to take over sovereign nations by force. One that guarantees Ukraine's independence today and tomorrow. Second, Europe must get serious about its own defense. We need two things. We need the will and we need the wallet. We all understand that in this new world, Europe must spend more and also ensure better interoperability of our forces. We must all be ready to take decisions, however painful, in order to put our money where our mouth is. And we are doing that by action and not talk. Since 2021, member states have already increased their defense budgets by 31%. That's good, and we're moving in the right direction, but we know it's still not enough. Russia spends 9% of its GDP on defense. So in 3 months, they make more weapons than we do in a year. So we also need to do everything we can to spend more and spend smarter. This isn't just about security, by the way. It's also about European competitiveness. And it's also about our often forgotten term, strategic autonomy. Many of the technologies that we use today, like GPS, drones, the internet, came from the defense sector. And yet today, we buy almost 80% of our defense equipment from outside the European Union. If we invested more in our European defense, we would drive innovation, we would boost our economy, and we would create high-skilled jobs in the process. The European Parliament understands this. As co-legislator, we have adopted regulations to ramp up ammunition production and reinforce our defense industry through joint procurement. And we've done this in record time. Any reallocation of funds for defense inside the current multi-annual financial framework will go through Parliament, and we will step up to the plate. We're also now starting to negotiate the next MFF. So we have a golden opportunity to better align our budget with our strategic priorities. It's clear, for example, that instruments like the European Defence Fund and the European Defence Industrial Programme, both in the immediate and in the longer term, must be strengthened. But public funding alone won't cut it, and we will need to mobilize quickly private capital. That is why Parliament has been pushing also for new financing tools. There are plenty of ideas on the table. We have called for the European Investment Bank to update its eligibility criteria so that military equipment beyond just dual use can receive financing. And while we have also seen movement also in the last few moments in this regard, more could still be done to maximize the EIB's role. The national escape clause is a very important tool. This would give the member states the flexibility that they need to invest in defense without breaking fiscal rules. And these are discussions that are on the table that we will discuss together at the Special European Council this Thursday on the 6th of March. And as I said before, and here the Parliament is very clear, nothing can be off the table. Now going a little bit further than just funding, because while funding is important, we know that just throwing money at the problem won't fix it if we don't change the way we approach defense together, and if we don't change that approach completely. This brings me to my third point, that Europe needs deeper integration in defense. Right now, fragmentation is costing us billions. Between 25 and 75 billion euros every year is lost to duplication and inefficiencies. It makes no sense for Europe to have 178 different weapon systems when the United States has 30. Now, the answer is staring us quite clearly, just right in the face. We need more bang for our buck. That means we need a single market for defense with simpler rules for our businesses. This will streamline production, it will enhance interoperability, and it will close those critical capability gaps. We've done it in other industries extremely successfully, so we can obviously do it in defense too. Finally, we must strengthen our alliances. We saw unity in action on Sunday at the London summit hosted by Prime Minister Keir Starmer, bringing together the leaders of Europe, UK, Norway, and Canada. These are key strategic partners for us. This moment in history has undoubtedly brought us closer together, and that is something that we must really build on. Of course, our transatlantic relationship remains vital. The United States is one of Europe's oldest and closest allies, and our partnership matters more now than ever. Europe and the United States may not always immediately agree on everything. Our approaches may differ sometimes, but I'd like to quote US founding father Thomas Jefferson, who said that not every difference of opinion is a difference of principle. And our transatlantic partnership, I am convinced, will last, and I have learned to never underestimate the following: Ukrainian bravery and courage, the United States' ability to negotiate and close a deal, European resolve to never allow another European generation to be lost behind an Iron Curtain. NATO will always be the bedrock of our collective security. The EU and NATO share 23 members, but we must complement our efforts, not duplicate them. The NATO summit in The Hague this June will be crucial in reinforcing the European pillar of NATO, and with Mark Rutte as Secretary General, we have a strong ally to push for greater EU-NATO alignment. All of this to say that Europe, at the end of the day, must stand on its own 2 feet. And that means more support to Ukraine, more defense investment, closer cooperation, so that countries ready to move ahead can do so. Now, that road won't be easy, but easy never has changed the world. I believe in Europe. I believe in our ability to defend ourselves and to shape our own future. Now is the time to act with ambition, with urgency, and with unity. And to get there, we will need confidence, courage, and above all, cooperation. And at every step, you will find a very enthusiastic, a very effective European Parliament pushing this agenda forward. Thank you.
Very much, Madam President, for this very important, eloquent, and dare I say, also uplifting speech. A lot of interesting things you shared with us, and of course, maybe to get us started, I'd like to ask more concretely, when you speak about exceptional times requiring exceptional decisions, what, in your opinion, should be those immediate exceptional decisions that the EU should take to fulfill its duty, as you called it?
So first of all, it takes courage to admit that what has been done in the past was not good enough. If there's one thing that I learned from the election last June, where me and 719 of my colleagues stood for a seat in the European Parliament, is that our citizens are no longer willing to wait for Europe to take the decisions that it needs, for those decisions to start to apply to them, and for those decisions to make their lives a little bit more easy, a little bit fairer, and a little bit safer. And I think it's against that big picture also because of what has happened over the past weeks, but not just because of that. We need to avoid having yet another European Council where we come together and say that this is what we think we need to do, only to leave with 27 plus a few others different opinions and conclusions, only for us to wait another 3 months before we meet again. There is no time for that. If the 24th of February 2022 showed us, is that when we woke up with alarm, shouldn't have been alarm, we had long been warned that this would happen by our Baltic and neighbors, Baltic partners and neighbors, is that we can no longer go as business as usual. And that's why we have invested unprecedentedly already in finding common action to help Ukraine. But now is the time to get our own house in order. And our own house in order means that we need to find all solutions, legislative, non-legislative, military, in terms of public and private funding, in terms of ramping up our own industry, in terms of being much more agile and flexible with our budget, in order to make sure that we are willing to address the challenges that we have. And that means, against the background of what I've just spoken about, it will take that courage, it will take ultimately conviction, and it will take the agility that we need to move.
And speaking of defense and security, we know, and of non-legislative items, we know that the Commission is preparing a white paper, which is expected to come out soon. And of course, this is the kind of document for which the Parliament has already called for a very long time ago, several legislatures back, if I remember correctly. Do you have high hopes, high expectations from this white paper that is imminent?
Well, in line with my, as you called it, uplifting thoughts, I would like to say yes in response. Why? Because when we see what the response has been also of the European Commission in our citizens' requests for example, simplification, making it easier for businesses to operate, identifying where our legislation can be improved, reopening when necessary. That ambition has to be matched on both sides, one with the proposals on the table, and two, with the speed with which we take those decisions ourselves. We called for a more integrated European and security defense union years ago. And I get asked quite a lot of this, what is the Parliament's position? We talk a lot about treaty change, we talk a lot about making our decisions easier to take, and I'm quite pragmatic. I've been in the city for a long time, and I would like to also see where we can arrive to. If now is the moment for us to have more interoperability, let's do that. If we see the strategy that has been adopted to protect, for example, our automotive sector, the next strategies will be on steel. The next strategies will also be on chemicals, for example. These are all industries that we've asked for more integration for us no longer to have fictitious, if I may, borders between one member state and another. We celebrate Schengen every day. We talk about rights to freedom of movement, but that's where it stops. At the end of the day, anytime something happens, those borders are introduced. We still don't have a savings and investments union. We still don't have a capital markets union. We still don't have a digital euro. We still don't have access to capital and mobility of capital from one country to another. All of that is needed in order for us to be better prepared in terms of defense spending, in terms of whether you have rules already that apply, and this is what we mean by non-legislative, how you implement, how not to gold plate to a possibility where you drive businesses out of Europe, how to make sure that where you need help in transposing legislation or in making sure your regulators and in your capitals are not going away or going beyond the intention of the legislator is what we mean with different measures that are needed now.
Be done in all these regards, and you've called for courage and cooperation, but we do know that even when it comes to courage, member states understand different things by it, and some are courageous but not in a cooperative way, let's say, which then begs the question: is coalition of the willings the future of how integration will pursue? And is it the way in which we can expect Europe to respond in the current geopolitical environment?
This is not a new discussion. For many decades, I would say, we have been discussing individual possibilities for some member states to go further than others. You have national realities, you have constitutional realities, you have, yes, lack of political will. You have also difficult coalitions that do not allow for speed. If I recall the very few months or even weeks at the beginning of the war in 2022, when the biggest discussion was whether one country would let another give to Ukraine military equipment, very basic, on the basis of licensing and patents. I recall a very difficult discussion with President Zelensky and his team in Kiev over a year ago. No, actually in May last year, so less than a year ago, when the president and his team were asking us to allow for domestic production, which was not possible because of that licensing restrictions. And we have spent all our time going, how are we going to move one piece of equipment? It takes days, if not weeks in Europe, from one part of Europe and another, because that kind of equipment cannot move like a car can or like a product can. Why? Because we're not interoperable, and we have essentially survived on decades of lack of trust on everything. This is how am I going to protect my own industry, while at the same time not realizing that overall our growth trends have gone down, and if we need to match what Mario Draghi told us to do, we will need to do much more than we've done so far. So I'm, let's say, looking forward to seeing the reaction of those leaders on Thursday. We already have differing interpretation of what might have been agreed or might have been thought on Sunday. So let's hope that Thursday can come with, common, and at the end of the day, what it boils down to is clarity of commitment. In order for you to show strength, we talk a lot about unity. It's not unity of purpose, but it's also unity of messaging. And that's what I will appeal for on Thursday, because there's nothing that our adversaries like more, is that where there's no unity either on our commitments or on our messaging.
Divide to conquer. But are you concerned that if there is not a unified action, and that if you have certain member states going ahead with others refusing to do so, that this will weaken the power that we can project as a bloc? And also, of course, it's not just about member states. I was reading this morning a poll saying that German and French citizens are very much against increasing defense spending. So citizens are not always on board with what Europe proposes to do. How do we get them on board? And where is the problem? Is it a problem of communication? Is it a problem of really diversing priorities and ambitions?
Yeah, I can imagine debates or reluctance or resistance, understandably, by people who will be told or could be told that in order for you to increase spending in some sector, you need to decrease spending in others. So, for example, education, health, as to social services. But if at the same time we are arguing or thinking about how to make Europe more competitive, competitiveness brings economic growth. And if we are going to bring up our economies by recognizing that some of our policies in the past might have had the opposite effect, by recognizing and being honest with ourselves that we always looked at, for example, economic growth and environmental protection as though they were mutually exclusive, by not focusing on how we can increase jobs and innovation, by looking at our decreasing ability to compete in, I think there are 14 emerging technologies. We are only competitive in 4. That's the reality, stark reality. And the reason why reports were commissioned last year were precisely for us to be told what we need to do in order to increase our competitiveness, to protect our businesses, to allow for our industries to move from one country to another, to allow for you to have access, start a business, if necessary, that doesn't do so well, and you can start again. That you can move from private to public sector in the European Union as easily as you can in other continents. You can't do that here. We are stuck in a system where comfort has meant that you work less. This is the reality. So I think if we are honest with our citizens and say, look, what is needed in order for us to make sure that our economies are strong? And understanding that if we are not secure, we are not strong. You know, this is a discussion I have at home every day. My husband is from Finland, and you can imagine this is a country that has a pretty long border with Russia, and it is a country that has always looked at security as being key to its economic growth, as being key to it being competitive, at it being key to it being able to stand on its own 2 feet. And I think we need a little bit of that dose further in Europe, especially in countries where for far too long governments have postponed the decisions from one mandate to another. And I tell you this as an elected politician, there is nothing perhaps easier than saying, you know, I'm not going to do something because I need to do everything to protect my seat. But that's the problem we've had in Europe and many places for far too long, that decisions have been postponed at the cost of short-term headlines, or just thinking that someone else will deal with that very difficult decision. And our predecessors, our grandparents, did not have that luxury. But since then, we have created the European Union as a peace, but also as an economic project. Two, we have had decades of freedoms, but this is also linked to the discussion on freedom of speech. And I was asked this last week in the United States. My answer was, let's not forget that until 30 years ago, many of our colleagues, partners, citizens in Europe, they had no freedoms at all. And so we, as a continent, know very well what it means to have that freedom and to fight for it and to protect it and do everything to protect it. And that's, I think, going back to your question, is it a lack of communication, is where the question lies. That we have not adapted to how we project and explain our principles and what we are going to do to address the concerns of the lives of our citizens. And if our citizens are concerned about whether they will have a job, about whether they have a house, about whether their children can walk safely in the street, then we cannot start talking about an increase in expenditure. That's the reason.
The other thing, of course, when we speak values, I mean, we all listened in bewilderment the speech of J.D. Vance in the Munich conference, and then we saw the train wreck that has happened in the Oval Office over the weekend. We do, when it comes to the transatlantic relationship, we do speak the same values, but do we understand the same values at this point? Do you think that there is a divergence in the way we understand what counts in terms of principles? You referred to the importance of principles. You quoted Thomas, was it Jefferson, right? That is, we can disagree, but it's not principled disagreement. Are we starting to have principled disagreements with the United States? And what is the implication of all that?
When I said that we are long-term allies and partners, it is because we live in a world where long-time allies and partners are hard to come by. There are less people in the world who can choose their own leaders than there are those who can. And that's the basis of everything. What does democracy mean? How can you have free and fair elections? And once you're in a position of responsibility, how do you use that responsibility in order for your citizens to entrust you with it one more time when you represent yourself before them for re-election? I was asked this, of course, often, and I continue to be, but I'd like to focus on two positive meetings that took place last week, and that is the meeting with the French president and the meeting with the UK Prime Minister. Certainly, I would have liked the meeting between President Zelensky and the President of the United States to go better. Certainly, I will not give up. Now is not the time to give up in terms of explaining where we stand, in terms of being honest where we could do better, in terms of with self-confidence saying this is where we want to go. And this is something that I think would benefit everybody rather than a de-escalation of confrontation. That is not what I stand for. That is not what I think Europe needs, and that is not what I think the world needs.
Okay, at this point, I would like to turn to our participants and see whether there's any questions and comments. We'll take a couple of hands. I can see, yeah, all right. Your hand went up first, so we'll start from you. Please briefly introduce yourself and try to keep your comment or question short.
It will be a question. My name is Dmitro Shkurko, National News Agency of Ukraine. I just want to ask your vision on the so-called peace through strength. If we follow the common rhetorics by US administration, they try to incentivize Russia, share some kind of rhetorics with them, and at the same time, they try to force Ukraine to give up a position and to some kind of unilateral concessions. Is that the peace of strength we could imagine? And the second part of the question, if I may, taking all these in mind, do you share the vision that the world as such coming to the global shift of democracy? And we are coming back in time to the world where there are some kind of spheres of influence, and the might means right, not vice versa. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I'm Stefano Spinaci from the European Parliamentary Research Service. And my question is about young people. So till now, as European Union, we build up and we deliver a lot of narrative about Europe as place of peace and the European project. How we can remodulate this, so reframe this narrative towards the young people, which at the end, they will be the future of our citizens. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Ayşe Yürekli. I'm representing Kagidar, Turkish Women Entrepreneurs Association here in Brussels. Thank you so much for your uplifting, but also confident, courageous and cooperative speech as usual, and always an inspiration. And my question is, as expected, about Turkey, because you have been mentioning UK, Norway and Canada when it comes to the London summit, high-level summit on 2nd of March. But I wanted to address the elephant in the room, because Turkey has the second largest army in the NATO and is a long-standing ally of Europe. And I would like to hear your opinion on how to involve Turkey more into the European security architecture. Thank you.
We come back for you,
Yeah.
Tom. Yeah.
So peace through strength needs to be our guiding principle. What does strength mean? For us, it means unity and it means clarity of purpose. And that clarity of purpose means that might is not right. And that is what we need to be clear in everything we say. But that also means that we cannot shy away from saying where we disagree or where we will not look away. There are many people in Europe that would like, the situation to go away, but it will not. For me, the courage and the resilience and the bravery that I saw on the streets of Ukraine, I will never forget. And I take it as my duty, but also my privilege at having met so many of your compatriots to explain to whoever I see how important it is what you are doing and how this is something that you did not provoke, that is illegal and that is unjust and unjustified. And I say all this because it might be clear to all of you in this room, but it might not necessarily continue to be clear to everybody who are also around the same table as us. And I say around the same table because if Europe is not at that table, then we have a real problem. It's a question of how decisive we can be, and that is ultimately up to us. We cannot blame anyone else for us not being there. I'm not ready to do that. My job is to clearly say where we are, where we should be headed, be honest where we could have done better, be honest about where we can do better, and go forward, but not to exclude myself by saying and whine that I'm not on the table and therefore someone else's fault. And that, I think, will be important if we continue seeing, as you called it, a global shift. I'm not ready to come to that conclusion yet, because I would like to look at these last few weeks also, sometimes turbulent, sometimes unpredictable, but also as a wake-up call for us, because we have relied for too long on predictability. And that is where we will be tested, and I think that's where we can respond with clarity. On youth, we, to be very clear, if it were not for the European Parliament, we would not have a European angle at how we're going to engage young people in democracy, in voting, first and foremost, in running for elections, in not being excluded from legislative processes, and in completely creating a new part of our population that is frustrated, disillusioned, and willingly marginalized. This was clear to us in 2019, has been clear for a long time, but when we look at elections such as ours, we invested quite a lot in making sure that we have campaigns targeted at young people in 2024. To a certain extent, we achieved that goal, but of course, we are very far. We have a European youth event every year or so, every 2 years, but small events between there and then. But let's make it clear, that's not enough. I would like to look at elections such as the last Polish general election, 2 Sundays ago election in Germany, where you have very high turnout, and that is thanks to a high engagement, including of young people. Now we can discuss who those young people are voting for, but my interest is in the fact that they voted. I have 2 children of voting age, and the realization is that, you know, as a candidate, not only as their mother, and I have to convince them to vote for me, but as a candidate, is that my message that I would say here, that I would say on the campaign trail, that I would say wherever I'm going, is appearing on their screen. Because the risk is that I might say a lot of things, but none of that will filter through the stuff that they see, without also going into details on what they see. But it's also the media, the type of messaging, what goes viral, what you say, and how you say it, is what gets our young people engaged. Because if we think that the 8 o'clock news is going to cut it, it's no longer, or the newsletters we read in the mornings when we wake up, it's not the same thing that our kids will read. And that is a realization. I'm also quite encouraged by the number of younger members getting elected. I would like more young women to get elected, and I would like more young people to be candidates. And that is a responsibility that our political parties have. And it's one that we need to work on a lot. And I spend most of the time going to political events and saying this, but I must also be honest with you when I say that I'm usually the only one saying this. That doesn't mean I will stop, but I need to, you know, work a little bit harder with my colleagues. On Turkey, absolutely. The presence of the foreign minister on Sunday was very important. The contribution to NATO is essential. And I can tell you also that there is a lot of interest in the European Parliament also in the discussions that are ongoing. And wherever I go, whether it is discussion of a large neighboring country, when we talk about politics, when we talk about economic output, entrepreneurship, very vibrant economy that is growing fast. Questions on human rights, of course, and development, but I can tell you that it's very much on our agenda, and you can be reassured of the Parliament being there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have time for another round of questions. Okay, got quite a few.
Thank you very much, Alison Hunter, Senior Advisor with the European Policy Centre. I'm mindful of your remark about the need for greater cooperation across member states. We had an announcement this morning of the 5 tools for Rearm Europe from President von der Leyen, and none of them are actually about working together. They are about the member states being able to continue to ramp up more individually. I just wondered if you might have a response to that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I'm sorry. It's just there's one. I'm trying to get them in the order in which I've seen them. Yes, I'll come to you.
Thank you. Yes, Runa from the Defense and Security Society of the College of Europe. A few weeks ago, there were the talks in Saudi Arabia, but they were only between Russia and the USA. What does the EU need to be a credible actor to not be bypassed by such talks, talking about European interest as well? Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I serve Union of Defense in Ukraine. My question, maybe European Union support technical, military technical, maybe program, maybe development. Big problem, European Union program technical, maybe 10%. Я обичаюсь, може я українською, щоб не так вийшло.
Okay.
Може, да. Щоб не попасти в таку залежність, як президент Зеленський. Так, да. Чи розглядає Європа технічні можливості залучення українських фахівців, які вже доказали. Так.
Does Europe consider technical engagement of Ukrainian
спеціалістів,
specialists?
Які вже доказали за період війни технічні можливості без великих ресурсів, таких як в Європі і в USA, і протистоячи Росії третій рік.
Does EU consider engagement of Ukrainians who already proved their defense sector to be effective into European defense? I mean,
okay, so using Ukrainian technical expertise. Okay.
Розуміючи, що Росія вже не зупиниться, і у Європи цей виклик є на сьогодні дуже актуальний. Дякую.
I think we answered the question. Thank you. And a final one from there. Yeah, the middle. Yeah, it's you.
Hello, I am Manuel Zarp with the Office of Peter Ajus. It's a pleasure to hear from you, Madam President. My question is regarding the Russian aggressor and their perception of the European Union. Russia seems to have the propensity to view the United States as a negotiating partner, but not recognize the European Union. What do you think the EU has to do to be recognized for the important actor as it is, alongside, of course, Ukraine, which is the most important participant?
Okay. You can choose.
So for the first question, of course, let's have a look at the details and what the outcome of Thursday will be. I would also like to recognize that we are in a situation where there is possibly no unanimity between member states, and therefore efforts need to be found to take steps beyond that. It's a reality. Is it ideal? Of course not. Will we insist that the institutional balance is kept? If there's something that we took upon ourselves as a European Parliament, is that we reformed internally for our processes to go very fast. So I can tell you that our decision on ammunition production, for example, took just 8 weeks. That would never have been possible in the past. And that is also because let's keep in mind that the Parliament is the one that actually is elected and was elected last June with a clear mission. And it is on the basis of that mission that the European Commission is now acting. And I would hope that what we see is more, let's say, closeness rather than making everybody the same. I was encouraged to see the UK taking a lead. It reminded us of good times in the European Union, if I can say this. And it also shows that the Prime Minister's intention of a reset that he mentioned when he came here, he took to heart and followed up. And that's something that's important for us to recognize. And it's also one in terms of, a military power with very large capabilities to come at the table. College of Europe, I'm very happy you have such, what did you call it, working groups?
The Defense and Security Society.
You have a Defense and Security Society. I was there 20 years ago. There was no such society, and I'm very glad. But there was one. That was the year that my country, together with another 9, joined the European Union. So you can imagine the optimism that we had at the time, as the sort of new generation of young College of Europe people. This I will join with Manuel's last question. Whether Europe is included or excluded, etc. I mean, I would not, let's say, join any, let's say, list of people moaning that we are not or we are. I think we should take things at face value. Will we be? Why are we? Or why are we not? And the will we be is, I think, open. Why are we, I think, is clear in terms of who can have the position of interlocutor, and why are we not is a reflection that we need to be stronger, and that we need to be tougher, and that we need to be honest, and that we need to be clear. Perhaps we were none of these that I just said. Rather, we were all looking at someone else to do the job, or hoping that things will blow over. But I don't think that's the case. I think we need to be very honest, especially after what happened last Friday. Yes, on technical specialists, I have met quite a few. You have also excellent digital programs. If I can see the leaders in this regard, Estonia is one of those countries. Your country is incredibly advanced. In terms of connectivity, in terms of interoperability, in terms of ability to switch connections to other countries, also in terms of how you have worked on processing of data, on interconnecting different agencies. So my answer is an absolute yes. And we have seen it also in the work that the Parliament has done with the Verkhovna Rada over the past years, where we have had a permanent presence there in terms of helping for cybersecurity. And your technical expertise is amazing. We could also learn from that.
Thank you very much, Madam President. We have come very close to the end of our meeting. Perhaps to for a very final question from my side before we part ways. Would you say that the effort to strengthen Europe's security and its presence on the global stage is also to do good on the promise that we have made to Ukraine and to the Balkan countries regarding membership? Do you think that that's part of the strategy, or should be part of the strategy, and also a way to strengthen cooperation in general, right? And of course, if we do that, what do you think the prospects of deepening integration beyond just defense and security? What do you think the prospect of that is? I mean, the Parliament has been very vocal with regards to the need for reforming the EU's operational system, but what do you think the hopes that we can still discuss and act on that are?
I remain convinced, and the European Parliament is by far, I would say, almost unanimous on it, that enlargement is a way for Europe to get stronger, and enlargement is a win-win for the country that joins and for the European Union. We look back on each and every round of enlargement. I think we can all agree that all of them were successful. Were there doubts before? Were there questions? Did some take longer than others? Yes. But I don't think anybody who used to doubt whether it was a good idea for Poland to join in 2004 still thinks so, or that Romania and Bulgaria or Croatia in 2007 and 2012 would join, would still think so. I think by far the added value of those countries inside the European Union, the contribution, the economic growth we have seen in those countries, the democratic standards, the increase of development in terms of rankings is amazing. We still have a lot to do, and there are still big differences between member states and another, but I think we should be proud of this project that started as a promise that war will never take place again on our continent, and today is an economic superpower. The reality, in the last 10 years, we've lost more members than gained. We can say that. So when the Commissioner for Enlargement says that 2030 is a goal to be met, then I would not like to see any more summits in this town where we tell our Western Balkan friends, yes, but not now, or no way, or wait, or there is one member state that has a question. If we are expecting these countries to continue to look to Europe as their home, then the last thing we can do, especially at this time, is close the door.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much. And thank you also for your participation and being so active. Thank you.